And now to introduce our guest speaker, a man who needs no introduction in San Francisco, renowned scholar, statesman, and American Marine, Secretary of State George P. Shultz.
Okay, I'm going to give you all a little bit of an intelligence test because I'm going to talk about the characteristics of somebody and I'm going to see if anybody can figure out who that is. Now, first of all, somebody graduates from West Point about 1975. That's one clue. But this person believes in education because he gets a master's degree in education, he gets a master's degree in business, and then he goes to the Army War College, Staff College, and all that kind of stuff. So he's knows a lot. Now, one time when I was newly on the faculty at MIT right after World War II, they had a convention that you're supposed to get up and say something. There was a guy named Bemis got up, and he said, I'm very pleased to be a professor at MIT. Shows what my colleagues think of me and what the administration thinks. But maybe you'd be interested in what some of the old timers in a little town in Maine where I grew up think. Because the announcer, a couple of them are sitting by the radio and an announcer comes through, Bemis made a professor at MIT, and one says, I'm not surprised, he was always a smart kid right from the first grade. The other one says, that's right, so he knew more and more. And the other one says, that's right, by this time that Bemis, he probably knows everything. The other one says, that's right, that Bemis knows everything, but he don't realize nothing. So by the time he gets through with all this education, he knows a lot, but he don't realize nothing. So he decides to get out into the field and do a few things that give him a realization, a little experience. So he really began to do. So after West Point, he gets a 30-man platoon and winds up in a little country called West Germany and someplace called the Fulda Gap. If you went to the Fulda Gap today, they would say it's a place where you go and you have casual clothes and you can buy stuff cheap. But that was not the way it was when he was there. So that's one thing that he did. Then I have to say that to have the kind of job that he does, he's got to know a lot about the Middle East and the different countries out there. So somebody has done that. And then he's had experience in mechanized infantry as well as an officer. And he's a funny kind of a guy. He enjoys jumping out of perfectly good airplanes. I don't know what gets into these people that do stuff like that. And he's even got a thing on his badge that certifies that he does that kind of stuff. And he was the commander of the 10th Mountain Division at Fort Drum. That's a pretty tough assignment. He's a proven combat leader. 203, he was with the 3rd Infantry Division to march up to Baghdad. And later he took command of the Combined Task Force 180 in Afghanistan. We led all the U.S. forces and service members from 33 coalition nations. My God, how can anybody do that? As Lieutenant General in 2008, he returned to Iraq to command the multinational corps of Iraq, composed of 152,000 coalition service members. Coalition. Got to command a coalition, that's not easy. 2 years later, President Obama made him a senior U.S. commander of the multinational forces in Iraq. And then, my God, he comes back to the Pentagon to be vice in the Army. So who is this guy anyway? Any of you figured this out? Well, I guess you'd have to say it's General Austin, who now is the commander of the Central Command, and man, that is where the action is. So, General, we're anxious to hear from you. We're honored that you're here, and we look forward to your comments.
Well, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and there are a number of luminaries in the crowd this evening, so I really am grateful that you decided to come out and spend some time with us this evening. I understand there could potentially be a couple of Marines in the crowd as well, so I'm not sure about that. You mentioned that Secretary Shultz needs no introduction in San Francisco. I think that's a slight understatement in that I don't think Secretary Shultz needs an introduction anywhere on this planet. To not know who he is, you'd have to have lived in a cave for the last 50 years. So, sir, thank you for that kind introduction and for your many years of service over what has been a truly remarkable career and a storied career. You are indeed a patriot and a great statesman. And this nation owes you an enormous debt of gratitude. And sir, on behalf of the entire crowd here tonight, I want to say once again, thank you for all that you have done. And a lot of great people in the audience tonight, but one guy I'd like to point out that's my former boss, General Jim Mattis. It's good to see you again, General, and thanks for your continued support of our Marines, our soldiers and servicemen, and thanks for being who you are. Thanks also to Major General retired Mike Myatt for your service and for all that you and the members of your team do on behalf of this wonderful organization. And I'm certainly grateful for the invitation to come here and to participate in this important forum. I want to thank everyone involved for your efforts and your warm hospitality. And so, again, we really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'd like to make a few opening comments. I'll talk a bit about the Middle East and about a few of the challenges that we're focused on right now at U.S. Central Command. And then following that, I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. You know, I often tell people that as the commander of U.S. Central Command, I'm responsible for an area that consists of 20 countries. 20 countries with 20 different stories. And some of these stories are good, and some are bad, but all of them are important for a variety of reasons. It is an area that is often characterized by fragile political transitions and civil wars and sectarianism and ungoverned spaces. And when things go badly there, it has a clear and sizable impact not only on the region, but across the globe as well. That said, it's not all doom and gloom in the Middle East. It's also an area that's rich in history and tradition and culture. It is a fascinating place with much to offer. And it is one of the most strategically important regions, holding over half of the world's proven oil reserves and plentiful natural gas reserves, which, as you know, are crucial to the global energy market. And the United States and our partners have vital national interest in that part of the world. Interests that include the free flow of resources through key shipping lanes and the prevention of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and also the defense of our homeland against the very real and persistent threat of terrorism and extremism. And so for these and a host of other reasons, it is an area that merits our focus and our attention and our continued collective efforts. And ladies and gentlemen, we have been actively fighting extremists since 9/11, more than 13 years now. But the fact is that we are nowhere near finished. We've had a definite impact on al-Qaeda and other violent extremist groups' capabilities. We've disrupted their efforts, and most importantly, we've successfully kept them from conducting another large-scale attack on our homeland. However, extremist elements such as al-Qaeda and the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or ISIL, still pose a significant threat. And we've seen this demonstrated very clearly over the past several months as we've watched this barbaric organization, ISIL, wreak havoc in Iraq and Syria. And I'll talk a little bit about our current efforts there in both countries. What I would tell you first is that ISIL is not a monolith. Over a period of years, the Iraqi government, led by Prime Minister Maliki, alienated both the Sunni and the Kurdish populations, and there was growing unrest. ISIL saw the opportunity and they launched their attack into Iraq, absent resistance from the Sunnis who viewed ISIL as a means for bringing about a change in their government. The Sunnis simply refused to fight. And in doing so, they facilitated ISIL's push through the country. And unfortunately, the security forces that did remain were largely incapable of mounting a credible defense against ISIL. After we departed in 2011, the leadership of the country made a series of poor decisions. And among them was the decision to stop training and also to stop maintaining their equipment. And as a result, their skills atrophied, and the condition of their vehicles and weapon systems deteriorated. And this precipitated a number of defeats early on in ISIL's push towards Baghdad. Now, fortunately, in recent months, we've seen some progress made, namely by the Iraqis. Most importantly, they've put a new government in place, and Prime Minister Hadi al-Abadi has vowed to be more inclusive of the Sunnis and the Kurds and other minority groups. At the same time, we have teams in Iraq that are helping the Iraqis to develop plans and to conduct operations to counter ISIL and to regenerate and restructure their security forces and eventually to reestablish their border. And this represents our main focus currently, enabling the efforts of the Iraqis. And it has to be our main focus at this point. The actions that we're taking in Syria, and in particular the airstrikes that we're conducting in Syria, are intended to help shape conditions in Iraq. Specifically, they are designed to disrupt ISIL's command and control, to attrit their forces, and to ultimately slow down the flow of reinforcements from Syria into Iraq. And I'm confident that we are having the desired effects. Of course, we're not doing this alone. Indeed, our efforts are intended to enable the broader whole of government approach that is currently underway. And equally important are the contributions being made by our coalition partners, and in particular, the 5 Sunni Arab-led nations of Saudi Arabia and Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Qatar. Their active and public involvement has greatly enhanced the fight. It also sends a clear message to ISIL and to other extremist elements that their actions will not be tolerated. Ultimately, the intent of our regional campaign is not simply to destroy ISIL, although that is a primary objective. But even more important, we want to do what we can to change the conditions inside of Iraq and Syria so that what we see happening there now does not happen again in the future. And the key to doing so is to enable the indigenous forces to develop the capability to defend their own borders and to provide for the security of their sovereign territory. And that's the goal of our advise and assist and train and equip efforts in both Iraq and in Syria. All that said, the effects of our military efforts will be short-lived if the Iraqis do not address their political problems. And ladies and gentlemen, the crisis in Iraq will not be solved by the military alone. And if the government of Iraq fails to take overt and sincere steps towards greater inclusiveness with respect to the Sunnis and Kurds in the near term, they are likely to lose their support. And the government cannot succeed long term without the support of the Sunnis and the Kurds. Now, I've been encouraged by some of Prime Minister al-Abadi's initial actions. And so I remain hopeful for the future of Iraq. But the fact is that the Iraqis still have a long road ahead of them and a lot of work to do. Meanwhile, our other top priority is the ongoing effort in Afghanistan, which represents somewhat of a good news story, in my opinion. Today, Afghanistan's national security forces consist of more than 326,000 Afghans. And they, not us, are in the lead for all security operations. And they're managing to keep the levels of violence comparatively low across the country. And oh, by the way, the Afghan National Army now consistently ranks as the most respected institution in the country. And that's an amazing testament as to how far they come in a relatively short period of time. And the confidence that the Afghan people have in the Afghan army, largely reflects the improved quality of life that the population is experiencing now as the country becomes increasingly safer and more stable. So if you're Brigadier General Jim Mattis, or now 4-star retired Jim Mattis, fast forward, as Brigadier General Jim Mattis, you were one of the first guys on a tarmac there in Afghanistan. No forces available to defend that country. Years later, 326,000 Afghans under arms defending their country. Or if you're Lloyd Austin, who was helping Carl Eikenberry to stand up the 2nd Battalion of Afghans in the Afghan Army, 2nd Battalion in 2003. Several years later, 326,000 Afghans. And again, they, not us, are in the lead for the security of their country that we continue to enable. Opportunities for Afghan women have improved in recent years. Women now represent 1/4 of the government labor force and 28% of the national parliament. Education and literacy levels have also increased. In 2001, some 700,000 Afghans were enrolled in primary and secondary schools. Today, more than 7.9 million students are enrolled in school. And more than 1/3 of them are females. And I continue to say that the most powerful weapon that we ever deployed in Afghanistan was literacy, because it has created some conditions that are irreversible. Also, unemployment or underemployment has decreased from 50% to 35%. And so, by almost all metrics, we're seeing progress made in Afghanistan. And according to the polls, most Afghans believe that their lives are improving. Well, that said, there's still much work to be done. And the Afghans will need to continue to build upon the progress achieved thus far. And they recognize this. And they're demonstrating the intent and a desire to do so. And I do believe that they can be successful going forward. However, they're going to require a bit more time and a bit more help. And we want to do all that we can to enable their success and to aid them in building additional capability. We cannot afford for Afghanistan to once again become a safe haven for extremist groups. For at the end of the day, increased instability and diminished security and even tyranny would not only affect Afghanistan, but also the Central Asia region as a whole. And we have to keep in mind that Pakistan is next door, and it has nuclear weapons. And it also has Al-Qaeda in the backyard. Of course, lasting security and stability can only be achieved if there's a credible, reliable, and responsive government in place. And fortunately, we've been encouraged by recent political events. The country of Afghanistan has begun to move forward under the national unity government led by President Ashraf Ghani and CEO Abdullah Abdullah. Now, these two gentlemen share similar priorities and beliefs, and both of them have signaled a strong desire to see the government succeed. Now, admittedly, theirs is not an easy undertaking. However, I do believe that they can be effective together, and I remain optimistic and hopeful. Hopeful that things will continue to trend in the right direction going forward. The next country that I'd like to talk very briefly about is Iran. Now, obviously, we're not in a fight with Iran currently. However, that's not to say that our relationship is an easy one. Our diplomatic corps has been hard at work trying to reach a deal with the Iranians with respect to their nuclear program. The most recent extension agreed to by the U.S. and allies allows for continued negotiations through the 1st of July of this year. And while we remain hopeful that the two sides will eventually reach an acceptable deal, it's unclear how things will play out. But whatever the outcome, whether there is an agreement or no agreement, whatever the outcome, the region will have changed forever. And we have to be prepared for what comes next. And we will be prepared. Of course, if we do reach an agreement, that's not to say that Iran will no longer pose a threat to our interests and to those of our partner nations. Indeed, we remain deeply concerned about Iran's behavior in other areas. In addition to their nuclear program, they also have significant cyber and theater ballistic missile capabilities, as well as the ability to disrupt the flow of commerce in the Straits. And Iran also routinely engages in malign activity through its Quds forces and through the support to proxy actors. And so our relationship with Iran remains a very challenging one, and we continue to pay close attention to their actions going forward. At the same time, we're watching with great interest at what goes on in Lebanon and in Egypt and in Yemen. And we're especially concerned about the situation in Yemen, which is the poorest country in the region. Over the past several months, we've seen the Houthis take advantage of political instability and the government's preoccupation with Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, and to assert themselves in an effort to increase their influence over the Yemeni government. They've leveraged their military capabilities to establish a physical presence in Sana'a and other key areas, to include the strategic port of Hodeidah on the Red Sea. The Houthis' recent activities are particularly concerning when you consider the potential impacts of Houthis' advances going forward. As all of you know, Yemen is situated on a strategic route to the opening of the Red Sea along the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. And there is some concern that Iran could bolster their support to the Houthis in order to increase their influence on the Arabian Peninsula. At the same time, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, or AQAP, which I consider, by the way, to be one of the most dangerous Al-Qaeda affiliates, AQAP has increased its attacks in Yemen both against the government and against the Houthis. And their desire is to start a sectarian war between Yemen's Sunni majority and the Shia Houthi minority. And so this is also cause for significant concern. Needless to say, the Yemeni government's under enormous pressure from multiple fronts, and if the factional strife in the country continues to worsen, it could cause Yemen to unravel as a state. And we risk losing a key partner in our counterterrorism fight. And so we are very interested in seeing how this plays out in the coming days. In the meantime, we must and we will do what we can to help President Hadi and the government to stabilize and to reassert control. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said earlier, it's not all doom and gloom in the Middle East. Indeed, amidst the chaos and the discord that exist in the region, there are many opportunities. And we have to constantly be looking for those opportunities, and indeed we are. We are always looking for opportunities, recognizing that it is through them that we will effectively shape outcomes in the region. And as we pursue these opportunities, principally through our long-standing and historically strong military-to-military relationships, understanding that the best method for mitigating risk is to leverage our partners' unique capabilities, and by enabling them to play a larger and more active role in combating common enemies and addressing various challenges. And we build their capacity in a number of ways, namely through robust foreign military sales programs. Actually, the CENTCOM region accounts for half of the total global foreign military sales. And our partners in the region want U.S. equipment. And they want it because they recognize that it is the very best in the world. We also conduct numerous joint training exercises with our partners and allies. And among them are large-scale multinational exercises like the International Mine Countermeasures exercise, which this year included more than 6,500 military service members and some 700 civilian mariners from more than 40 partner nations operating throughout the Arabian Gulf, the Arabian Sea, and the Red Sea. You know, I went out to Bahrain in November to witness some of the training, and I have to tell you that it was really incredible and impressive to watch. Most important, we build partner capacity through our physical presence in the region and through our continued and close collaboration with our partners in different countries. You know, as a CENTCOM commander, I spent about half my time traveling throughout the Middle East and parts of South and Central Asia. And I meet routinely with senior military and civilian officials, and they share their concerns and they ask for our support. They also provide invaluable insights on the security situation. And it is through these engagements that we increase awareness and effectiveness and strengthen our partnerships and build trust among nations. At the end of the day, all of us have a vested interest in seeing a stable and secure region achieved. And success will require everyone working together towards this common goal. You see, this is not just the military's responsibility. This is not just the State Department's responsibility, or even America's responsibility alone. As former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger stated, and I quote, "Peace cannot be achieved by one man or one nation. It results from the efforts of men of broad vision and goodwill throughout the world." End of quote. And so it is not solely our responsibility, but clearly we have a share in the task at hand. We have a vested interest in seeing stability and security achieved in that remarkable and strategically important part of the world. And having spent the better part of the past decade plus serving in Iraq and Afghanistan alongside the outstanding soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and civilians who make up America's team, I can assure you that the United States military remains the very best in the world. And we will continue to do our part. And we will continue to contribute to this team effort going forward. And we will keep doing what is required to keep our nation and our interests around the globe safe and secure. Thank you again for the opportunity to join you here this evening. May God bless all of you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America, the greatest country in the world. I'll be happy to entertain your questions now. Thank you.
General Austin, we had a number of questions concerning our national interests in the region, specifically in Afghanistan and Iraq. We launched operations in 2001 after our nation was attacked, and 13 years later, we are still in the region. Have our national objectives, our military objectives, changed in the region since then? And how does the fact that our country is now energy self-sufficient change the playing field?
So whether or not we still have vital interest in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region, my answer to that question is you bet we do. What we want to make sure happens is that the Afghans are able to control the security of their sovereign territory so that we don't have ungoverned spaces, and from those ungoverned spaces we will once again see mischief being exported to the rest of the region, to Western Europe, and most especially to our homeland. So our vital interest here remains the defense of our homeland. And because of that, I think it's important to ensure that the work gets finished. And we've had great effects on the al-Qaeda organization over the last decade plus, but as you know, some of the cell and some of the key leaders remain intact. And I think it's important to continue to apply pressure to this network to make sure that it doesn't have the ability to do what it did in the past and attack our homeland. What was the second part of the question there?
How does the fact that our nation is achieving energy independence, especially with respect to oil, alter the state of play?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. And I got to tell you that this is one of the things that causes some of our partners in the region to be a bit concerned, because there are some that believe that our security relationships are based upon our dependency for energy, or our desire for energy. And that's not the case. And it's also not the case that we are energy independent at this point. You know, we are working towards that end, but we still have some work to do. And it'll be several years before we can approach that point. But some of our allies believe that, again, as we become energy independent, we're going to turn and leave the region. And so what I continue to do as I talk to the leaders in the region is to reassure them that we have vital interest in the Middle East. And those are not going to change. Protection of the key shipping lanes. 60% of the world's energy is in that region, so those shipping lanes have to remain open. And even if we are energy independent, if that commerce gets interrupted, it will affect the global economy, and that will affect our economy. So that's a vital interest for us. The protection of our homeland is also a vital interest. And to counter the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. This is really important. If you think about where we were 18 months ago with Syria, trying to get control over their chemical weapons, we're in a different place now, but it's not completely resolved. And we now see Iran trying to obtain a nuclear weapon. It'll be interesting to see how that turns out. Pakistan has nuclear weapons. And again, as I said earlier, they also have Al-Qaeda in the backyard. And if it doesn't concern you that here's a country with nuclear weapons and Al-Qaeda, if that doesn't make you restless at night, then there's something wrong. And so another reason to keep pressure on this very dangerous element of Al-Qaeda. Next question, please, sir.
The next question is our battlefield changing, and can we expect in the future, in the light of what recently happened in Paris, more attacks against hotels, as in Mumbai, against newspapers, such as in Paris, or against schools, such as in Pakistan?
Yeah, I think we're all hearing our intelligence community tell us that we can expect to see more lone wolf type activity. What's most dangerous about what we're seeing here, certainly, the activity of these extremists and terrorists. It's disgusting, and it needs to be kept in check. But what's the driver is behind all of that is the ideology that gives these actions, birth. And so we not only have to counter the actions, but we have to do something as an international community to counter the ideology. And we have to go after those conditions that enable that ideology to flourish. And so this is going to require an international effort, and it's going to take time to get after this. But yeah, I think we can expect to see more of that kind of thing going forward. And to counter that, again, got to counter the ideology, but you also have to work with partner nations in our region and in other regions to reduce the numbers of ungoverned spaces that are out there that these elements, these transnational terrorist elements, can work in. Okay?
A Western saying is that circumstances make for strange bedfellows. And in the Middle East, a saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. One of the most complex things facing your region right now is Syria and the regime of Bashar al-Assad, who is fighting ISIL as we are, and the nation of Iran, who is also fighting against ISIL. What kind of planning challenges does that pose for your staff in our strategy for that conflict?
Who asked that question? Hey, listen, I think you hit the nail on the head here. This is one of the things that makes this entire regional problem of Iraq and Syria so complex. As you know, our Iraq-Syria campaign calls for us to try to reestablish security and stability in Iraq first, and then transition to Syria to continue to counter ISIL. It is a counter-ISIL campaign. Clearly, as we take actions to put more pressure on ISIL, and we are putting significant pressure on this organization and good effects in Iraq and Syria, Clearly, Assad can benefit from that. But where we may have a common enemy here currently, we clearly don't have common interest. And we've been very vocal about the fact that our vision of Syria in the future does not include Assad. And so any thought of us collaborating with the Syrian leadership is not a well-placed thought. I think that's not going to happen. With respect to Iran, some of the same types of things. Clearly, we have a common enemy, but we don't have common interest. We have some common interest, but clearly this is has been a difficult country for us to work with. We're doing some things to try to negotiate an agreement along with other nations on Iran's nuclear program. It's going to take more time to get this done. But even when that happens, as I said before, it doesn't mean Iran's going to turn into a nice guy overnight. There are still things that we have to be concerned about. Their ability to mine the straits, their Quds Force activity, their tactical ballistic missile capability. And so I think this makes for a very interesting region, a very complex problem set. And again, we're going to have to take this one bite at a time. And again, we are making progress with our ISIL campaign, and we'll see how this plays out.
General Austin, let's journey to the edge of the empire. You mentioned Egypt, and you have 25% of that country beneath the poverty zone, another 25% of that population hovering above the poverty zone. We have an economic problem in a very strategic region. And secondly, the northern part of your AO, we haven't heard much about the stands. Are they stable? Is that a success story?
So the Egypt and the stands. First of all, the stands, I mean, as we watch things play out in Europe, it has relevance in terms of our relationships with our partners in the stands here, because we can see Russia is and will continue to put increasing pressure on some of those countries. But the stands remain are one of the key opportunities in our region. And I think for a reasonable amount of investment, we can develop partnerships and develop partner capacity in those countries that I think will pay significant dividends. And so we're going to continue to invest in that. And I know that we see a lot of things incrementally moving forward in the stands, and that's very encouraging. Egypt is an important country to the region and an important country to the United States of America. Why is it important? Well, it's got a significant Muslim population there in Egypt. It is highly respected throughout the world, and certainly in the region. It has ownership of the Suez Canal. That's an important choke point that I think provides significant operational and strategic value to us. It has a peace treaty with Israel, which is really, really important. And we want to see things between Egypt and Israel continue to trend positive. And right now, I would characterize that relationship as in a pretty good place. So our military relationships in Egypt are strong. I know Jim's probably met with El-Sisi. I met with him several times when he was chief of defense there. I know all of the senior leaders, military leaders in Egypt. They want to do the right things. They want to remain our partners, and I think it's a good thing. It's the right thing for us to do to continue to cultivate this relationship. Next question, sir.
Several questions came in reference to our efforts in Iraq. $25 billion spent to train the Iraqi army and prepare them. You alluded to the Maliki government and the problems caused at from the political level. What are we doing in terms of lessons learned as we look at Afghanistan and the proposed drawdown from Afghanistan to prevent recurrence in that country?
As you asked this question, I mean, I know you know this, but maybe some people in the room don't know this. You know, I was the last four-star commander in Iraq, so perhaps I should skip this. I can always blame my former boss here, who was Jim Mattis was my commander when I was the commander in Iraq. But so what's different? You know, why is it important to continue to invest in this effort? Well, what's different now is that we have a government that we believe that we're going to be able to work with going forward. We're hopeful that we can. Why is it important to continue to invest in this effort? It's important because Iraq is an important country. It's, you know, geographically, I mean, it's in a really significant place. Stability in that region means a lot to us with respect to making sure that there is sustained access to energy and some other things, making sure that there is no ungoverned space that terrorism can be exported from. If we think that if we left ISIL alone, that it would stop at the borders of Iraq and not continue forward, we're kidding ourselves. You know, ISIL left unchecked, I mean, their goal is to continue to expand and overtake more territory, establish the caliphate, and eventually make a move on places like Lebanon, Jordan, and certainly Israel. And so this doesn't stop if you leave it alone. And this is not Las Vegas. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. This will follow you home. And so this transnational terrorist threat is unlike anything that we've had to deal with in the past. And I think more and more the international community is coming to grips with that. And this is why we've seen so many nations volunteer to be a part of this coalition. The Counter-ISIL coalition, as you know, consists of about 61 nations. Not everybody's contributing the same thing. Different nations obviously volunteer to bring different capability to the table, and it's not all military. But it takes a coalition of that nature to continue to counter this type of heinous threat.
There's an information war in a virtual world taking place in the cyber arena with ISIS and indeed Al-Qaeda and other extremist groups using the internet, using web-based products, using telecommunications very effectively. What are our counters to those? And what do you see evolving from that? And how is this use of technology linked to their recruiting efforts?
Great question. This enemy is more adept at the use of of media, of the internet, and of other things than any enemy that we've ever faced. And the products that we see coming out of this organization are professional products. They run this organization, oh, by the way, like a business as well. It's a big business, and they are very adept at not only controlling their resources, but promoting their activities and recruiting using the internet. And what we've learned over the past, 18 months to 2 years is that they are incredibly effective in terms of recruiting people, in terms of facilitating the movement of foreign fighters around the globe and especially into Syria. And we have to figure out a way, we, the international community, have to figure out a way to better deal with this. And we're going to have to do this in a hurry. Because the way that you get after, that you reduce the capability of this type of an enemy is you have to reduce his ability to finance himself, and you have to reduce his ability to recruit and employ foreign fighters. You know, if you told me 10 years ago that you could recruit somebody to become a suicide bomber on the internet I would have said that's probably not possible. Because 10 years ago or several years ago, we all believed that in order to have that kind of an influence over somebody, you'd have to have some kind of personal contact. But what we're seeing is an incredible ability to leverage the internet to get people to buy into a corrupt ideology and to perform acts that are really unthinkable. And we, the international community, have to get busy on finding ways to begin to address this and counter this. Got time for one more?
We have time for one more question, and this is going to be a softball, General Austin. So somebody sent a question forward, and I've added a little bit to it, but you were a second lieutenant, squared off against the Soviet Union when you had West Germany and East Germany. And at that time, could you have ever imagined yourself as a general officer taking responsibility for such an important area on the globe? And what lesson in leadership would you impart to your fellow countrymen as well as fellow members of the profession?
Well, thanks. That's probably the hardest question you've given me tonight. Back when Second Lieutenant Austin started out, it was a different era. And all I wanted to do was just be a leader and learn about leadership. My very first platoon sergeant, a guy by the name of Fox Ballard, told me, "Lieutenant, let me get you straight. Don't worry about being a general. Worry about being a good lieutenant, and worry about being a good leader, and stay focused on taking care of these troops that are placed in your charge. And no matter if you're a lieutenant, if you're a major, if you're a colonel, if you follow that philosophy, these troops will refuse to let you fail. They will refuse to let you fail." And I've tried to follow that throughout, and old Fox Ballard was right. The quality of our men and women in uniform it's astounding. And I saw that quality played out in incredible ways as we were, attacking from Kuwait up to seize Baghdad. The things that our troops did for each other and the things that they would do for their leaders is just incredible. They believe in what they're doing. They believe in their country. They want to make a contribution. They deserve good leadership, and if you stay focused on them, it's probably going to work out just fine. But they're going to follow you if they think you believe in what you're doing and you're confident in what you're doing. And so old Fox Ballard was right. I'm approaching 40 years of service now, and I think back, our volunteer military has been in play for 41 years now. So I've seen this thing through from its inception to the current time. And I got to tell you, you think back, we kind of started down this path of skepticism about whether or not we could have an effective military with volunteers. You think about what your troops have done over and over and over again, volunteers. They've been able to do that because they've had great families that support them. As important, they've been able to do that because they've had people like you that support them, that believe in what their country's doing, that believe in what the military does, and without your support, this doesn't work. And that support has been incredible. I would just ask that as we go forward, don't forget about these troops. It'll be easy to do. Don't forget about them. They've made a lot of great sacrifices on our behalf. They do it because it's what they want to do. But they deserve a little bit more, as they transition in life and as they deal with some very difficult problems. And so we're going to need your continued support as they try to handle the future. Thanks a lot for allowing me to join you tonight. This has been a really special experience and a great day overall for me. God bless each and every one of you.